Arthur Nebe rose from a Berlin detective to head of Nazi Germany's criminal police, a man trusted by Himmler and feared by his subordinates, yet in 1944, he turned up on the list of conspirators who tried to overthrow Adolf Hitler. How does a man go from architect of the Nazi police state to traitor within it? This is the story of Arthur Nebe, the Nazi cop who betrayed Hitler. Arthur Nebe was born on November 13, 1894 in Berlin, the son of a schoolteacher from a middle-class Prussian family. Like many young men of his generation, he grew up in an atmosphere of rigid discipline and patriotism. When the First World War began in August 1914, Nebe volunteered for service and joined the 17th Pioneer Battalion of the Imperial German Army. He served on the Western Front, where he was twice wounded by poison gas. The experience left both physical and psychological scars, but also reinforced his admiration for order, obedience, and hierarchy, values that would later shape his policing career. After the armistice in November 1918, Nebe returned to a defeated and chaotic Germany. The Weimar Republic faced uprisings from both the left and right, and the police were often caught between politics and public unrest. In 1920, Nebe joined the Berlin Kriminalpolizei, or Criminal Investigation Department. Within 4 years, he had become police commissioner, recognized for his efficiency and intellect. Colleagues described him as ambitious and somewhat aloof, a bureaucrat more comfortable with statistics and reports than street work. During the 1920s, Nebe's career advanced rapidly. The criminal police underwent professional modernization, embracing fingerprinting, forensics, and centralized record-keeping. Nebe fit perfectly into this world of analytical policing. Yet the economic crises of the decade, hyperinflation, mass unemployment, and political extremism drew many civil servants toward nationalist and authoritarian views. By the early 1930s, Nebe had drifted into far-right circles within the Berlin police, where resentment toward the Republic and fear of communism ran deep. On July 1, 1931, Nebe joined the Nazi Party and soon after the SS. At the time, the Nazis were not yet in power, but Nebe sensed opportunity. He became a liaison between Berlin's police and the growing Nazi government, providing information about investigations, and the growing Nazi movement, providing information about investigations and helping coordinate with party activists. His decision reflected both conviction and calculation, aligning with a movement that promised stability and order and also offered career security. When Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor on January 30, 1933, Nebe was already well positioned within the system. He immediately supported the purge of political opponents within the police and assisted in reorganizing departments under Nazi control. By the end of that year, Nebe had become a trusted figure to Heinrich Himmler's expanding security network. The once independent detective from Berlin was now helping construct a new kind of policing, one that blurred the line between law enforcement and ideology. In the span of less than 2 decades, Arthur Nebe had transformed from a wounded frontline soldier to a rising star of the Nazi police state. The traits that defined him early, discipline, ambition, and loyalty to authority, would soon propel him into positions of immense power and ultimately moral catastrophe. After the Nazis consolidated power in 1933, Nebe became one of the most influential policemen in Germany. His reputation for administrative skill and his early loyalty to the party paid off quickly. In 1935, he was appointed head of the Prussian Landeskriminalamt, the central criminal police office in Germany's largest state. Only a year later, in July 1936, Himmler and Reinhard Heydrich reorganized the entire security apparatus. The Gestapo, the Sicherheitsdienst, and the criminal police were all merged under the newly formed Reichssicherheitshauptamt. Nebe was placed at the top of the Kripo, heading the Reichskriminalpolizeiamt, effectively the National Detective Service of the Third Reich. From that position, Nebe helped integrate traditional criminal investigation into the machinery of Nazi state repression. Under his supervision, the Kripo expanded its definition of crime to include social and racial categories. Homeless people, sex workers, and those labeled asocial were now subject to police detention. Jews, Roma, and Sinti were placed under Kripo surveillance and registered as habitual criminals. These shifts blurred the distinction between public security and ideological policing. Nebe's office compiled extensive data that later facilitated deportations and mass arrests. By 1939, Nebe's power reached beyond Germany's borders. He oversaw the Kripo's involvement in identifying and deporting Roma families from Berlin and coordinating investigations into perceived racial and political enemies. That same year, he was promoted to SS Gruppenführer and Generalleutnant of Police, reflecting his status within Himmler's elite circle. Yet Nebe remained different from the more fanatical SS officers around him. He was methodical, bureaucratic, and outwardly reserved. One of his highest-profile assignments came after the November 8, 1939 bombing attempt on Hitler at Munich's Bürgerbraukeller. Nebe personally led the investigation into the would-be assassin Georg Elser, a Swabian carpenter who acted alone. Nebe's interrogation concluded that Elser had no links to British intelligence or organized resistance, a finding that infuriated Himmler, who had wanted a wider conspiracy. It was an early sign of the precarious balance Nebe maintained between professional policing and political obedience. Throughout the late 1930s, Nebe built a vast network of subordinates, but he also grew increasingly enmeshed in SS politics. Within the RSHA, he answered directly to Heydrich, whose ruthless efficiency set the tone for the security services. Nebe's Kripo became indispensable to the regime's control of everyday life, tracking criminals, enforcing racial laws, and feeding information into Gestapo and SD databases. Historians still debate how much of Nebe's work was driven by ideology versus ambition. Some suggest he viewed the Nazi police system as a way to professionalize law enforcement, even as it descended into state terror. Others see no such ambiguity, describing him as an opportunist who used his expertise to serve a brutal regime. Either way, by the time Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, Nebe was no longer just a policeman. He was an integral part of the SS's command structure, ready to take on a new and deadly assignment in the East. When Operation Barbarossa began on June 22, 1941, Arthur Nebe was among the several senior SS officers who volunteered for frontline duty. He was placed in command of Einsatzgruppe B, one of 4 mobile security units that advanced behind the Wehrmacht into Soviet territory. These formations operated under the Reich Main Security Office, reporting directly to Reinhard Heydrich. Their stated mission was to secure the rear areas, but in practice, they carried out systematic operations against Jewish communities, political officials, and others targeted by the Nazi regime. By early July 1941, Nebe's headquarters were established in Minsk, operating behind Army Group Center. He commanded roughly 655 men, divided among 4 subordinate Einsatzkommandos, supported by local auxiliaries and police battalions. Their movements extended from Vilna to Mogilev, Smolensk, and beyond. Reports sent to Berlin were strikingly bureaucratic, tables of figures treated as if they were routine statistics. A dispatch dated July 13, 1941, recorded large-scale security actions in Minsk and Vilna, bearing Nebe's own signature. Under Nebe's direction, Einsatzgruppe B carried out increasingly systematic security operations in the occupied territories. By August 1941, these missions had become part of a grim routine. In Mogilev, Nebe oversaw experiments designed to make these operations more efficient, including the early use of sealed vehicles powered by engine exhaust. This method later evolved into the mobile gas vans deployed elsewhere in occupied Europe. Historians identify Nebe as one of the early figures involved in developing these mechanisms of large-scale actions. By November 14, 1941, the unit reported approximately 45,000 recorded fatalities, figures whose accuracy remains debated. The documents illustrate the methodical precision of Nazi bureaucracy. After the war, Nebe claimed through intermediaries that he had exaggerated numbers to end operations sooner or protect subordinates. Modern scholars generally reject these explanations. Surviving records portray a commander who implemented orders efficiently and without documented objection. In October 1941, Nebe returned to Berlin, citing illness and administrative needs at the Kripo. He resumed his previous post and maintained his rank as SS Gruppenführer. For the rest of the war, he remained within the upper echelons of the Nazi police system. Historians still argue whether his departure from the East reflected moral discomfort or simply a routine reassignment. The truth likely lies somewhere between ambition and self-preservation. Nebe had seen what the SS was capable of and what it rewarded. After returning from the Soviet Union, Nebe resumed his role as head of the Reich Criminal Police Office. From his headquarters in Berlin, he managed investigations, data systems, and coordination with other branches of the RSHA. In June 1942, he was appointed president of the International Criminal Police Commission, the forerunner of Interpol, where he represented Nazi Germany in international policing circles. To most observers, Nebe looked every bit the loyal SS general, yet privately, his relationship with the regime had begun to fracture. By 1943, disillusionment was spreading among segments of the German elite as the war turned against the Reich. Nebe's connections with conservative officers and bureaucrats brought him into contact with circles that would later form the July 20th plot against Hitler. Among his acquaintances were Hans Oster and members of the Beck-Gödler group. Some conspirators saw him as a valuable ally because of his control over the police apparatus. Others distrusted him, recalling his record in the East. Still, Nebe's inclusion in resistance plans suggests at least a degree of willingness to act. One episode that remains especially controversial occurred after the Great Escape from Stalag Luft III in March 1944. Hitler demanded revenge after 76 Allied prisoners escaped. When 73 were recaptured, 50 were executed on direct orders. Nebe's office helped select the victims, though how much personal involvement he had remains debated. Some historians argue that this participation undermines any claim of moral opposition to the regime. Others see it as an example of the contradictory position of men who tried to balance conscience against survival inside a totalitarian system. When the July 20, 1944 attempt on Hitler's life failed, Nebe's situation became perilous. He had been assigned to lead a special police unit that would arrest high-ranking Nazis if the coup succeeded. The order never came. In the chaotic aftermath, the Gestapo began rounding up suspects across Berlin. Nebe initially escaped detection and went into hiding, reportedly aided by sympathetic police colleagues. For months, he lived under assumed names in rural safe houses, moving frequently as the net closed around him. In January 1945, his luck ran out. One of his former mistresses revealed his location to the Gestapo. Nebe was arrested on January 16, 1945, imprisoned at Lehrterstrasse in Berlin, and later brought before Roland Freisler's People's Court. The trial on March 2, 1945 lasted only minutes. Freisler denounced Nebe as a traitor to the Führer and to the German people, sentencing him to death. On March 21, 1945, the sentence was carried out at Plotzensee prison in Berlin. Nebe was 50 years old. His remains were never formally recorded, and his name quickly disappeared from official documents. After the war, some surviving conspirators portrayed Nebe as a man who had turned against the regime out of moral conviction. Post-war historians, however, painted a far darker picture. A career policeman who had risen through the Nazi system, participated in large-scale atrocities, and only joined the resistance when Germany's defeat was inevitable. Whether his final act was redemption or desperation remains unresolved. If you found this video insightful, watch What Happened to the Gestapo After World War II next. A look at how another pillar of Nazi power faced its reckoning. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more history inside. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.